So today I'm going to so today we're going to discuss about Bootstrap. I'll give you an introduction and we'll get started. So before that, in the last class, we discussed about Flexbox. Were you guys able to implement it in your blog?
Yes, Mendra. But some of them didn't work, like align items or some flex shrink. They're saying like that maybe system is not supporting.
Yeah, it might be that the Chrome browser is not updated, and it might not always be with the Chrome browser. Sometimes the way you would put your elements, it may not work. But that's where the DevTools comes in. So you can use the Dev. So ultimately, your goal should be to know what each of these styles do, and you should be able to apply those styles in DevTools. And not all of them are going to work all the time, because sometimes it's all design things, right? So sometimes it's not like we will be able to see the flow, like we can check what element or what container is something within, but it's not, sometimes it's not very obvious like what's wrong with that. That's where so DevTools can help you out in those cases. But yeah, sometimes it may need some more digging in. So anyways, let's start with it. I'm going to start with Bootstrap today, and in the last class I told you guys that I had a session with Sadhika with JavaScript. So did you guys got time to look at that session?
Yes.
Okay. So did you try creating a form and then validating it using JavaScript?
Yes, Mandra, I was able to do it.
Okay.
I didn't try this calculator. I try.
Okay, yeah, calculator you can try, but I think more simpler would be to start with validation, because there you just need to write a few functions. Calculator, you may have to design the UI elements and then the underlying logic there, and it can be complicated. Like if you understand how you're going to display the data, then if you want to retain history and stuff, I mean the requirements can just go on and on. So I would suggest you start with the form validation first, and then you move to the calculator section. Calculator is something that you can do in your free time, and once you get an understanding of how to hook elements together, like the UI elements and the JavaScript pertaining to it, I think that should be fine.
Yes, sure, Samandra. Yeah, first we started with form validation only. Now later we will focus on calculator.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, let me share my screen now. Okay, no, I don't. That. Oops. Mm, Okay. So today we are not gonna work with random page. So the thing is I showed you how to I showed you individually the different tags, and I showed you how to like individually write CSS for them and apply the styles, like what each styles do. Now this one that was primarily for the for the understanding purpose. But I'll show you today like how we actually go ahead designing a real page, and based on that we will see like where Bootstrap comes in and how it's used. So if you ask me like what's Bootstrap, it's more like you can think of it as like a large CSS file which has been minified. Um, like when you start doing React stuff, I mean, before that, there's some terms like minified, beautified, then you have a minified, beautified, bundle, and all those things. So these are the things that you may perhaps need to know, because these are mostly like not related to development, but when you move some things to production, then there are some advanced issues that might come in. For example, this happens quite frequently, like you have a you guys know about CI/CD pipeline.
No, Somendra.
Okay, so so when you start working on the real world projects, I mean, when you go into your industry at that point of time, you'll see a lot of use of CI/CD pipeline. CI/CD stands for continuous integration and continuous development. So like you keep developing, then you keep integrating, keep testing, and that's how the things keep moving forward. So at the time of building like your app, that can be an Angular app or anything, or it can be a React app or anything. So when you build it, so at that point of time, your code does not remain much like what you see right now. Like, if you go to your HTML, you'll see that how neatly this has been indented along with all the styles, highlighting and everything. But when you deploy it when you want to deploy to the server, this is not the correct way to do it, because maybe this file is small, but when we code real world applications, they're like large, and by large means like it can have like 10,000 lines of code. So, and that's like a very minimum thing, because if you remember, when Facebook was first created back in 2002, it had like 10,000 lines of code. And at that point of time, like today, I think 1,000 to 2,000 lines of code is just CSS, and I'm not even talking about JavaScript or HTML. So the problem with deploying like this is that ultimately when your client fetches these things from your server, like these files, and if the files are huge, then obviously it will take a lot of time fetching that same thing. And if you carefully analyze these files, there's a lot of like white space available. For example, for after h2, I can put this p here, so that will utilize the white space here. But if I do that, then it will not be readable, and that would create problems for me, like debugging or stuffs like that. So that's why, like when you do the development at that point of time, it's fine, but when you deploy it, so it kind of creates so it does like this. It removes all the white space and puts all the code like in one file. So if you have a like JavaScript file which is like 100 to 100 lines long, then and if you minify it, it would probably be like maybe 4 or 5 lines, but each line would be like very large in length because it's all just got appended together. And that's what we call a minified version of your code. So in the minified version of your code always gets deployed in your server or in production environments. And what you see right now here is what we call beautified code. So if you have a minified code, you can actually get a beautified code out of it. So the beautified code simply means that it's neatly indented and it's much more readable than a minified code, because the purpose of the minified code is to reduced network latency and performance. But that's not the purpose for while we are developing, because at the point of developing, our focus is mostly on like how much readable it is, so I can easily debug it and basically implement the features. So that's for minified and beautified. Let me also tell you about bundle. So if you remember, like if you have done some Java coding, if you write like microservices and stuff, when you build your Java code, it creates something called Java archives, right? So these jar files gets created and they gets deployed. So similarly, like in the UI also, like if you write a code, so and if you build it, then what you'll see is that, okay, let me see if it's there is probably shouldn't be there. Okay, I can't do it right now. Okay, so in the UI, so it creates an index.html. So when you do the React at that point of time, you see that you might have coded a lot of components, but when the final thing gets deployed, it just has one HTML file, which is index.html, and all your code that you have written in various different component files, they all get appended together into that one single file. And similarly, and for the CSS, you will have a perhaps a static directory inside which you will have the JavaScript script files as well as the CSS files. So because the reason why it's done is because React is a framework. So a framework just makes you gives you a very neat kind of an interface, you can think of it, which enables you to do development in a certain style. For example, the for React, we primarily focus on the components because we can reuse those components whenever required. So it creates more like a very disintegrated design and very much reusable kind of a design. So but at the end of the day, the browser that you have, like Chrome or Firefox or anything, they don't understand Angular, or they don't understand React or anything like that. They just understand HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So yeah, so when you're trying to deploy your code, it creates a build file out of it. I mean, it creates this bundle file out of it. So yeah, so this bundle file actually gets deployed, and the bundle file doesn't contain, so it contains a lot of JavaScript code, a lot of CSS code, and a lot of HTML code. But it would look very different from the project that you have built, in which may have different components, you may have different classes, different HTML code, or different CSS files or anything like that. Yeah, so that's in brief about what is minified, what is beautify, and what is bundled. Now, I'm telling you all this is because when I start with Bootstrap, so Bootstrap essentially, when you will import Bootstrap, you'll see that a minified version of Bootstrap gets imported. Because if you see the beautified version of Bootstrap, it may have like large files, and if you start in like importing those files into your, or even the CSS files, it may like make your code very slow. That's why they create a small minified version of their files, which is like something you can use directly in your HTML or CSS code. Right. So I was talking about last day about yeah, how individual tags are, and we were talking about how we essentially use individual tags as well as individual CSS tags also. So today, as I said, I won't be doing this. What I'm going to do is like I'll show you in brief about how we go about designing an HTML page. Okay, along with the CSS, we will also write a little bit. This is just to give you an idea, like the individual tags and styles, so you can always use them. But this is just to give an idea of how we actually go about developing things. Okay, so let's start. Top type. Let's declare this as a top type. HTML. Then we have the head. Okay. Close the head. Title. Alright. Maybe what? Uh, Large shape door. Right. Now let's come to the body. And this is like the outlook of how it's gonna look like. Let me first save this file. Some of my documents. Maybe it's not HTML. Yeah. And why is this thing not moving away? Oh no. Put it down. And create one more file, which is our CSS file. Let's come back to our HTML code. So what we're trying to do here is like, let's show you. So what we're trying to do is like, we're trying to create a simple card here. So you might know what a card is, like you see very often in many HTML pages, like you have this kind of a box here, and in that box you have some title here, and then within that there must be some content here, and there may be some buttons at the bottom. Yeah, so this is what the card looks like at a very basic level. I mean, there can be different styles you can apply to it, and but this is what it looks like basically. So I'll show you like how we go about actually creating such a thing and how to actually code such a thing. That's the more like using the standards that we use. So since we are talking about the first thing is like we should define a container, or if you are confused you can also write use card container. Okay, because there are no more other elements I can just call it container. And the second thing I need is like I want to define a card, so my class should be card. Then inside the card there are like several sections. The first section would be the card title. So in here you can define class name, sorry, not name, class title, and then inside this you may have so the text itself, so you can define it as like class equals card title text. Then we have the card content. So we define class as card content, and then so it may span across multiple lines. Let's say we have 2 lines for that. Okay. Let me have like a subheading kind of a thing here, maybe. Content. Um, Okay. Class equals to main. That's all. So what I wanted to know, what did you to understand from this is like how we actually go about designing an HTML element, how we actually name the different classes that we have, like card title text, card content, then you have, this should be card content subheading, card content main. And in this way, we essentially design the HTML elements. Right now, we might have been doing it very differently here, where you can actually use something like body span, and we have like nav tag and stuff like that. So, but we don't generally name our CSS code like that or HTML code like that. We in a real world, we do something like this. Okay, and now let's put the text here. You might see like a lot of different classes are used here. So you might ask like, okay, this is a title, so why can't I use H1 or H2 or H3 or something like that? So yeah, I mean, you can use H1, H2 or H3, but if it would be much more better if you provide some sort of customization to your title text, right? So your title text should be customizable. If you just put H1, H2, H3, then it has got some predefined styles which gets applied. For example, if you have H1, then obviously the font's gonna look very large, but let's say if you want a font to of a specific specific size, then that is not possible until you apply the class and write the CSS for that. That's the reason why we use these custom, like these kind of, we design it like this, like you name this class, even though it's a title, we don't put H1 here. So it depends on the use case, but most of the times it's more like this. So this is the card title, and here we say let's talk about cards. Here we are going to demonstrate the purpose of the card. Yeah, so that's all. And now we come to our CSS code. The first thing that we have is this container. So dot container. I don't want to do much about it. Maybe I'll display this box. Then you come to the card. You can create multiple cards out of it as well. Say that's card one. Then card two. And the code here. And then we have card three. There's the code here. Right. So what I want in the main container is like justify content space around here, around is fine. Okay, and now we come to individually designing the cards. So the first is like dot card. Okay, so for this card, I think what we might want to do is like give it some sort of border. So that's it. And then come to card title. So I For card title, we don't really want to do anything as of now. Or maybe we can put some color here. For the color of the title should be maybe no, not good. Something dark like brown. Yeah, it's brown. And the card title text and text is going to be, we will give it the font family of normal and font size of 2.5 rem, right? And then let's come to what do we have now? We have card content. Yeah, one thing that you should always make sure is like not to manually type out these classes, because if you get a typo and the styles don't get applied, then you might like spend the rest of your day trying to understand why the style didn't get applied, and ultimately come to know that, oh, it was just a typo. So yeah, to be sure, always copy paste and never try to type out manually if it's okay. Okay, so for the card content, what do we want to do here? I don't think we want to do anything here actually. We can just define the subheading and the main contents font size. So let's do that. So you might say like, okay, if we are not applying any style to this card content, then why even define this class at the first place, right? So this is where the standards come in. Like we define as part of the standard, because this is how we develop, like in the future. If someone wants to provide provide some styles to this particular div class, maybe trying to look a little different, or maybe trying to apply a background color to the content and all those things. So in those cases, you can simply use this card content class. Okay. And so he won't have to like add class equals the card content. But if you have followed your standards, then you'll definitely be able to get around. So we don't want to do anything with card content right now. Maybe with card content subheading, we give it a size of, maybe we give it a font and font family. Let's make it Gothic. With a font size of maybe 1.5 rem, and then we have the card's main content here. So let's give it a the font family. Oh yeah, one thing we can do here is like we can apply this font family not here but here, and here we just font size to be, one rem, let's say. And here, since this is the title text, maybe we can increase the weight here. That's it. Very good to go. Now let's see what happens here. Let's go to the File Explorer. And let's increase. Okay, so everything kind of got one after the, oh, okay, the styles didn't get applied. That's because we didn't import our CSS file here. Goes to style sheet. Make it goes to text. Just give the source here. Yeah, let's see now. Still in the right. This displays block. Looks like yeah, I mean the CSS is not really there. Okay. Have I imported it correctly? Let's see. Yeah. Okay, it was href. Sometimes I go to React. That's why this happens. In React, you have source instead of href. Yeah. And do that. Yeah. Okay. So this is how it looks at this moment. And now looking at this, you can do a couple of things. For example, this text, title text looks a little bit bigger. So what you can do is like you can go to the dev tools and find the right size for this. So you can select this font size and you can press the down arrow key. So yeah, so it will reduce the size and you can see like how it looks like that. So maybe 1.5 rem is what we're talking about here. But 1.5 rem is like very similar to this one. So maybe you can put it like 1.75 or something. And that looks fine. So this is how we go about designing our HTML elements. So you can see here the use of flexbox. Like we didn't have to write padding left, padding right, margin left, margin right, and all these things. It automatically got assigned. Okay, but the purpose of this was not to demonstrate Flexbox, something that I showed you in the last session. The purpose of this was to show you how you should go about writing your HTML and CSS code. You can see one thing that you might also see here is like not a lot of IDs are used, like mostly classes are used. That's right, because as I said, that as part of the use case, ID is just used to identify any element which is unique to your HTML code. But in here, you don't see anything unique. Okay, like there is a title which should be there in all the cards. There's subheading which should be there in all the cards, and there's some content which should be there in all the class. So there's nothing unique about it. That's why you don't see IDs used. But if you have something unique about a particular class, like for example, if you have this card and you want something like something to show differently as comparison to other cards, then that is the use case where you should be using the IDs. But most other than that, you should go with the classes. And the classes naming convention should always be something like this: card title, card header, card content. Excuse me. So it should be something like this. And uh yeah, there's something else I was talking. Yeah. And here you can actually see a little bit of React, like you might, so this question that might get asked to you, which is like, why React? Okay, what's the purpose of using React? Can't we create an HTML page, and why do we need to use React? That might be one question. The other question might be like, uh, I mean, you can, so you may actually answer that React is used to create SPAs, like single page applications, which we discussed in the first session. But, a client may say, well, okay, that's fine, but still, why React? So this is like one of the reasons. So you see this card one here, and then you see this card two here, right? So if you see here, both card one and card two have the same kind of what you can say, um, hierarchy or structure. Like you have a card, you have title, you have text, you have content, you have subheading, you have the main content. So for both the classes, maybe this data can be different for different cards. Maybe this is I want to here I don't want to talk about cars, I want to talk about cars, and let's say here is cars. So data may be different for different cards, but essentially the design for each of them is same. So if we create like one card here, the design for one card here, and I want to reuse it, then that's not possible in HTML, because if we are trying to define it again, then we obviously have to write it again just to render it to the HTML page. But that's possible in React, where we actually reuse parts of our code to create a new ones. That's what we call componentized, structure of the code. That's where React is used. So yeah, I talked a lot about React and minified and bundle and all these things, but that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this was to show you the standards of how we write HTML and CSS. And continuing to that, we come to our main topic today, which is Bootstrap. So a Bootstrap is essentially what I can say is like it's a yeah, so you get a large CSS file which has a lot of predefined styles, and you can use those predefined styles within your code. In that way, like you don't have to write any extra CSS for your designs. You can get some very good designs, and you can do it with like very less kind of, what I can say, with a minimum efforts, because you already have that CSS file defined. All you have to do is just import it into your code, and then all you have to do is just use those classes within your HTML code, and that's how it starts to work. Right. So in industry, like we use, if you go to when you go for your jobs, at that point of times, you'll see that there are lots of people use lots of different things. I mean, the two main, very famous UI UX libraries are, one is Materialize, and the other one is Tailwind. So both of them, Materialize is something that you can just start, bingo, just need to import it and then get started. For Tailwind, you may have to write for some configurations at the start, and then we go to the main content. So Materialize is created by Google, and Tailwind, I don't know who has created it. And so Materialize actually, now they have changed their name to MUI. It also stands for Material UI. But what I want to stress upon here is like both Material and Tailwind uses Bootstrap as its base. So if you know Bootstrap, then it shouldn't be very hard for you to actually pick up a Material or Tailwind. And sometimes even like many, you know and like, so in some of the companies that I worked, they also use their own custom UX classes. Like they have created something like Materialize, but that is something that is to be used within their own kind of apps, the styles of CSS. So they also use the base as Bootstrap, so you can understand the importance of Bootstrap from here itself. Now, the good news about Bootstrap is that you don't really have to do a lot of effort to learn what Bootstrap is and how it works. It's actually quite simple. All you have to do is like, you should know how to like write CSS, or edit CSS or use CSS within your HTML code. If you know that, then that's okay. Now, first of all, let's go to our code. Okay, let's open incognito mode, and um let's write Bootstrap. Bootstrap. So the latest version of Bootstrap is Bootstrap 5. Okay, so you will get this site called Gets Bootstrap. So all you have to do is like click here, and you go to the docs section. So in here you can see how is like you can in the documentation you can see how to use other things. You'll find examples of how they're used and everything. So let's start with the simple one. I mean, there are, first of all, if you try to get started, um, if you see the get started section, you'll have this quick start, okay, and then you'll have this. Okay, I'll talk about CDN in a short while, but remember, so these are the CDN links. Okay, so first of all, do you know what CDN is? Anyone? Okay, so CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. It's primarily used to transfer files much faster. Like if you use a REST API or something, it might take a long time. So CDN is like very fast. It uses some cache memories and some kind of distributed network systems where through which it can transfer files quickly. So here we are talking about Bootstrap. Uh, okay, I think okay, Alok has joined. Okay. So Alok, we are not discussing React today. We're just discussing Bootstrap. Okay. Uh, yeah, so we use CSS.
Okay, okay, Samantha.
Yeah. So we will be using CDNs for now, but when you'll go to your industry at that point of time, never ever use CDN because it's they won't actually, some people don't allow you to use CDN, but as a general rule of thumb, you should never use CDN. So instead, you should actually use download the minified version and actually use it in your app to build it. But the minified version that you are downloading, I'll show it to you when I'll start with React at that point of time, how to download and how to include it in your project. For the time being, since this is just a, just an intro section, we just use the CDN for now. Let's go back here. Let's remove all this, write it here. Okay, let's save this and let's go back to our documents and start with next slide. Okay, so at this point of time, this just brings hello world, but you may find it a little bit different from what we have in our case, right? Because this is also H1 tag, but as you can see, the font is a little bit different here. That's because it's coming from Bootstrap. So the styles from the bootstraps gets applied, and that's how the font is a little bit different, and that's very easy for us to see in comparison to writing a normal H1 something, right? Even if you like go here and click on inspect, you see that, okay, you see that there's a media query getting fired. You see a lot of different styles being used here. So some have been used from SCSS. I'll talk about that. SAS, SCSS, etc. These are like preprocessors for CSS. Then you will see some pseudo selectors used after, before, and all this stuff. So all these styles are getting applied because you have started using the bootstrap section. You can always override this styles getting applied by creating your own custom class and then assigning your HTML element to that custom class. But yeah, but like most of the times, it's very easy for you to use the bootstrap defined styles instead of creating your own. I mean, that's the purpose of using bootstrap. Okay, so let's come back to it. But I mean, there's nothing much here to discuss. It's more about just exploring and trying it out on your own. So if you go back to the documentation here, you can see. So don't go for these SAS and all these things right now. These are preprocessors. We'll talk about it later. Yeah, one thing. So when we talk about layout, there's a few things that I need to tell you first. First is the grid system. So Bootstrap, this entire screen that you see, it divides it into like 12 different, what you can see, 12 different columns or 12 different, it divides it into a sort of a table, and the table contains like 12 columns. So in that way it's very easy. So you might wonder like why it's doing that. You will get to know right now like how we customize things. So let's copy this code here and go to our HTML, move this. Okay, we paste it here. Mm. So, so what you see here is like there are three columns, and the three columns take spaces accordingly. But but if you go a little bit down, you'll see that here we are used how we are doing it. So first we are defining the class as container, and then we are defining test center. That's fine. Then we are defining us one row, and inside that row you have like three different columns. Okay, and each of them has class column. So you'll get to know why it's there, because you can actually very easily customize the size of these boxes. So if you go down here, yes, so we're talking about the grid options here. So you see here, so this is of like equal with 1 of 2 and 2 of 2. Okay, but let's say that you want one of them to be wider and one of them to be not that much wider, then in that case you can do something like this: call 6 or call 5, etc. So what it means by call 6 is like you create a column, but you use 6 different grids. As I said, that the entire screen is divided into like 12 different grids. So you use 6 of them. That's why this one looks larger, and these two kind of get squeezed out. So what happens is like if you use call 6, then six of the boxes gets what I can say, assigned to this particular box, and what's remaining is the 6th grid that gets divided equally between the rest two of the boxes. So this should be of 3, this should be 6, this should be sorry, this should be 6, and this should be uh, 2 by 12. So this should be, no, this is 6. So 12, what's remaining is 6. So this should be 3, this should be 3, right? 3, 3, 6, and this 6, 12. Yeah. So this takes 3 grades, this takes 6 grades, this takes 12 grade. That's how it works. You can also do something like that, in which you have one of them as variable with content. Variable with content essentially means that it automatically resizes based on the size of what you have defined it for them. For the other two boxes, for that you use a column, and then instead of hyphen defining it like 5 or 6 or something, you use md auto or md auto class. So this is like another class which helps you to create, boxes with variable content. Now, when I showed you the card session in the card section, when I was trying to show you you know, how we were writing the CSS code, you find a lot of similarity with how the naming convention is there for the CSS files that they have created. And that's basically what I was talking about, is how the standard is and how you should be writing the CSS and the HTML code. Okay. uh, then you move to the all the breakpoints here. You can apply them like call 8, call 4. So like this should be 8 and this should be 4. Yeah, one thing you might ask is like, okay, fine, let's say like if you have this call here as 6, and then you have 6, and then let's say that for all of them we define it as 6, then what happens? Okay, because you say that you only have like 12 grids here, and since call 6 means that each of them should take 6 grids, then how it's gonna present it in a way. So the answer is like, first of all, you should never do this because it may lead to a lot of strange styles being applied. Okay, and you might face some issues in debugging. So you should make sure that you should not exceed this 12. But let's say if you exceed this 12, then what's going to happen is, most likely what's going to happen is like, if you it's going to divide the entire grids that you have defined by 12, and accordingly it's going to distribute. For example, if you have call 6 defined here, then 6, 12, then you have 18, then you have 24. So you have defined it for 24 grids and we just have 12 grids. So it will like try to equally distribute it amongst the four. So it should be like 4, 5 at 24, 6 at 24. So 6 grids, but it will then further divide it by 2 because you scaled it up by a version of like into 2. Okay. Then the other question that you might have been, okay, fine, if it's not like, instead of call 666 and then we want to define it as 1 as 5. Okay, then it's not divisible by 2. Then what happens in that case? As I said, you'll get strange styles getting applied. Most likely what's going to happen is like, it will convert it into some integer and take the ceiling or the floor value for it, and those kinds of things gonna happen. But this is something that you should make sure that you should never apply it like, or you should never use it like this, because this gives you some very strange things. Yeah, and then you have this naming. You should also follow this naming convention here. SM stands for small, LG stands for large, and all those things. Okay, so there are like lots of different things that you can try. So the documentation contains all the different ways which you can use. Okay, you won't require everything here, but based on the kind of things that you're trying to design, maybe you can use few of them. Apart from the layout, what's more important? So typography here essentially talks about what they're providing in terms of your normal text. Okay, so you see here, instead of like doing it like h1 bootstrap heading, they're using a class as h1. Okay, so they apply some new different kind of styles as apart from h1. That's why I also did not use in the card section when I was designing. I did not use the h1 tag. Instead, I assigned it to a different class, because I told you that it may require some modification. You may want to keep the customization door open in case someone wants to customize how the heading looks like. So it may look like an h1, but you may also want to apply some more styles to that. So that's why they have, like, if you see the class, they have defined its h1 to indicate that, okay, the styles that we are applying will give it a similar look as to what it would look like if you have used an h1 tag. But you can use this class and then you can override this class to include some of your own styles to it as well. Okay, and yeah, I mean, they have like a lot of, so you have this text muted. What it means is like, this one, like, it will come in a little bit of different text color and some different font, just to identify it is like it's a faded text or a muted text in comparison to the normal text. And you have the display headings here. So display 1, display 2, these are the classes that they have defined here for different kinds of display. And yeah, then you have the lead, all these things, so you can explore them, and there are lots of different things that you can use from here. Similarly for images, okay, um, you can use the styles they have defined in your image. One thing is like image fluid. So image fluid basically means that the height will be auto and the max width will be 100%. So if you apply this image fluid class to your image that you are trying to create on your HTML page, then the width that it is going to take is going to be the max width of the viewport, which is like it will always take the entire screen, but the height will be auto, like based on how the other components are being placed. It's gonna adjust the height of the image according to that. That's what we call an a fluid image. Similarly, you can use thumbnails, okay, for an image. You can align the image, okay, float start, floating, rounded, and all those things. Yeah, so these are the options that you might want to have a look at it. Then forms are there, but I don't want to go there. Let's talk about cards first, because this is very like commonly used at element. So this is what a card that they have created. So you have this image cap, then you have this card title, then you have some text here, okay, and then you have a button at the end. So as you can see that this card looks much more refined than the card that we have created in our example. If we go back to our code, and if we just if we press the style sheet, make sure if we press to and that's CSS. Yeah, we applied this styles. Okay, so you can see this theme that the card that we have created. This one that they are providing is like much more refined, and all you have to do for creating this card is just to use the classes that they have defined, and that's all. And that's where Bootstrap is so powerful. Like it helps you lower down your development time. Like you can focus on the more important things like how to handle the data, how to clean the data, and all other things instead of like focusing upon like how you're going to design it. So they will provide you some custom made components which you can customize from your own self also, like specific to your needs. Okay. So yeah, these are the like the classes that we're providing. This is text muted. So you will see a lot of like classes being used from the other sections, and that's pretty normal because you are like when they talk about card, they have text in here, they may have buttons, they have links and images and everything. So obviously some of the classes that they're going to use here is like something that you might have already used in some of the previous sections that we discussed, like in typography or in the image section. Then the other important thing that we want to discuss is a carousel. A carousel, you might have seen something like, it's more like a slider. Let me give an example for this. So this is how it is, like slide one, then you can move to slide two, and then yeah, so this is how what a carousel is. So remember, when you're using a carousel, using just CSS, you cannot slide a carousel. You also require JavaScript. So if you're using a carousel, make sure that the CDN link for your JavaScript is also imported, which is like at the bottom of your body tag. Okay, and then you can also have controls in terms of how you want to do it. Like you can provide this arrow key here. So this is the previous button here, and this is the next button here. Okay, so here you can see like the classes that they are using: control next icon. So this does the kind of naming convention that they are using here is very similar to what we have done in our code, like card title, text, card content, and others. So that's the reason why I showed you like this part, so that you can correlate it with how we do it in an industry and how they are doing it, because it's going to be very similar to that. So that's that. I mean, there are lots of different things here. I suggest you to go through them and explore them, like follow the docs. They have already got the code examples here. All you have to do is just copy paste into your code, and you should be able to see the effect there. And there's nothing really much to talk about it. Just to how to get started with it. All you have to do is just include the CDN links in your HTML, and that's all. That's all that's required. And Yeah, and the rest of the things that they're doing is like, as I said, that they have got a CSS file, and all you have to do is just use the classes from that CSS file into your code. The only thing is like the more you practices, the more you come to know about the different styles that they're providing, and the faster you'll be able to create your customized components in that way. Yeah. And coming to your interviews, generally they don't ask you questions directly from Bootstrap. I mean, even the senior most developers, they generally refer to the docs in order to find out what styles can be used. Although, like if they have used Bootstrap before, they may be familiar with some of the styles, but it's not really possible to remember all the styles that they have. So just they just refer to the docs and see what styles are getting, what styles we can use here, and that's something that you should also do. So from the interview perspective, you won't be directly asked questions from Bootstrap as such. You may get asked a few questions, but as per my experience, you generally don't get asked directly questions from Bootstrap. Yes, you may be asked questions from CSS, because ultimately at the end of the day, Bootstrap is just CSS. So if you know CSS, you would be able to pick up Bootstrap very quickly. So that's the only thing that's there. So your today's assessment for so I think that I've already taken that one session with JavaScript. So you guys might be working on form. You might have worked. Some of you might have worked on the form validation already. So those people who have already completed with their form validation, I suggest them that they should be, you know, they should probably start, you have that block created. All you have to do is like include the CDNs and then start applying the styles and some of the elements that they're providing here, and see if you can beautify your HTML code. Okay, similar to Bootstrap, let me also show you something. So I was talking about a material URL. This is materialize. Again, this is also like based upon Bootstrap, like, and the Bootstrap is created with Bootstrap as base. It's a Google product. Google has created it. You can go to CSS here. Again, for getting started, you just include the CDN here. So you have the CDN links. Just copy it and include it in your code, and then you're free to use the CSS files. You can also explore materialize here. Um, but it's just the same thing. So I suggest you go with Bootstrap, and if you get time, then you can obviously go to materialize and see what they have there. Yeah, if there's anything more. Okay. That's all from the CSS section. Yeah, one more thing I forgot to tell you about two things. One is position, and one is left, right, and all these properties. So I would suggest you, like, you have already done the flexbox thing, you can actually go forward and apply these things. I'll explain you in a short while, like here. Let me see if they have some examples. Uh, position. So just like display flex and justify content that you were looking at like in your CSS code, the position is just a property, and it has got some 5 different values that you can provide to it. One is static, one is relative, absolute, and sticky. Out of these, like, we most frequently use relative, fixed, and absolute. I'll talk about each one of them. So relative is like it places your flexbox relative, like the position is going to be relative to other components that you use in your in your HTML. And if you use the position as absolute, then the position of your of your HTML content is gonna be absolute, in a sense like it does not correlate with any of your containers or any of your neighboring HTML elements. So it's just gonna be absolute. So for example, like let's say um, let's say here that you have a search bar. Yeah, something like this. Let's say that you have a search bar here, and you have this icon, this magnifying glass icon here. Okay, so how you're gonna do it? So first thing is, like, if you use this input tag as or some or any kind of HTML element, okay, then how you're gonna place this particular icon over that HTML element. Okay, so if you want to do that, then you have to make sure that this HTML element does not get affected by some of his neighbors or any of his components. So it should be like absolute, and that's the use case when we use absolute. And if you want it to be like, for example, if you're using these icons must be within a div, so I don't want them to be like overlapping with this input tag or this Google icon. So in those cases, they can be placed as relative. So the position for them should be relative. And if you put the position for them as fixed, then it becomes fixed for your viewport. Like you might see in some uh, you know uh, websites, like you have Gmail images here. If you scroll down, okay, the Gmail images goes away to the top, but in some websites you'll see that there's still be available at the top even if you scroll down. That's what happens when you put the position as fixed for a particular element. So you can see examples here. Try it yourself. Yeah, so if you see here, the position is relative, and the left is 30 pixels. Yeah, that's one more thing that I didn't tell you about, which is left, right, and others. So this is what a relative does. Like, this is your normal one, and you want it to be positioned relative to your normal element. So you apply the left here. So they have applied the left here. That's why it's away from your left viewport. And the position is relative. That's why it's relative to your normal neighboring container. I mean the neighboring HTML element. While on the other hand, if you use absolute, for example, if you this is fixed one, and this is okay. Yeah, they have explained it in a very good way in a diagram. Like, this element is relative and this is the absolute element. So as I said, when I give you the example of this input tag and how to put this image tag, I mean this icon tag over this input tag, so that's what they are also saying here. Like, you have this div element as relative, then you define it as like absolute, then it gets over your relative element. And that's how you do it, like what has been done here. And if you use the position as fixed, then in that case it's obviously going to be fixed, and it's not gonna disappear from your viewport even if you scroll up, down, or anything like that. Okay, so that's all from the CSS section, I think. What we will actually circle back to the CSS once we get completed with our React code, because when you will be doing your React at that point of time, you will be writing a lot of CSS, and we will continue to talk about CSS for the rest of our session. Right, but when I say that, it's like that the CSS up till here is what you exactly require to get started. And the learning for CSS, it never ends. And when I say that I'll circle back, is because I will talk about preprocessors for CSS, like the SAS and SCSS preprocessors later on, once you are comfortable with writing normal CSS code. Like, you have been doing, like, once you create React apps and there you use the CSS, then then I'll be able to tell you like what is preprocessor and then why we use it. So I can even like give you an example of why we use it, but the real use you will see there. So if you go to our CSS code that we wrote here, okay, uh, you see that within the container, this card is contained within the container, and this card title is there within the card, right? So this is all a kind of nesting, right? So it would have been like much more better if you can write. So right now, like if you have the container, then next the card, then next the card title. So if what happens is like I have created the container here, but instead of writing card here, if I write it, let's say at the end of the file, where my cursor go? Yeah, at the end of the file. So still the style is gonna get applied, right? The style still gets applied. But if you start reading this code, then the container is here, then you might feel, okay, fine, where is the card class defined? Okay, and it might be easy to for you to find in this particular CSS file, like 30 pages, 30 lines of code. But let's say if I show you the CSS that we use in our organization or any other professional organization, you see that the CSS is like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 lines of code. So in those kind of scenarios, it's very difficult to like always do control F and see where what the class is defined, where is defined, etc. So it might be simple, but it's not in in the in industry terms what we call scalable. So the code itself is like not scalable if we write it in this fashion. That's where the preprocessors for CSS comes in, like Sass and CSS. So Sass allows you to write the code in a nested way. So like anything which is like one step, one level above in your nesting, in your nesting section, then the styles get applied to all the underlying sections, until unless you use this this important, then in this case the style your like nested style gets applied. So yeah, we'll talk about the preprocessors later on, but this is the general use case why we use them. Okay, but for the time being, I think what's important for you is to get your hands dirty with Bootstrap and some normal CSS code, and then we'll talk about how to write fancy CSS code using preprocessors. Okay, so that's all from the CSS section, guys. If you have any questions, you can ask me now, or we can move to the JavaScript section. Okay, Swapna, Sheetal, Sadika, any question? Or are we good to move to JavaScript?
I'm good now, but yeah, today we'll work on the bootstrap thing. If we come
Yeah,
across something, I will ask.
yeah, sure. Okay, so if we talk about we talk about JavaScript. Let me see if I have the code. I actually had the session with Sadika, but I don't think I have the code now. Let's see the documents. Okay, Sadika, do you have the code for the JavaScript work that we did? Okay, you might.
No,
Yeah.
Sumendra, we
Okay.
worked online right that day.
Okay. Okay. Mm,
Soumendra, is
okay.
this Bootstrap is part of the React project or is it a different project?
Yeah. Mm. So, you will find two terms. One is UX and the other one is UI, right? So the UX is the design element, which is the non-functional aspects of your overall UI, which is like if you have created, like for example, the cards that we created, right? So if you see, the cards don't do anything at all. They are just like design elements on in the browser. And then you have the UI section, which where we write a JavaScript code and make things work. So the UX is where your CSS part comes in. I mean, not just the CSS, I mean, UX contains other things also, like creating the design and the Figma and all those things. But we are not concerned about that. But the CSS and the HTML, they are just used to create the non-functional aspects of your HTML code, and the UI where we write JavaScript creates the functional aspects of your code. So when we talk about React comes under UI, and the CSS comes more under the design, which is the UX section.
Got it.
Did you,
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So let me search if I have the CSS and I have the JavaScript for that. The last section, otherwise we'll do it again. Mm, okay, no, this is not the one. Go to the desktop. Yes. Mm, did we have it in something? No. Maybe we have it in no. Okay. Okay, anyways, we are not able to find the JavaScript code. So we are going to write it again. We may have to write it again. So let me give me a hands up of like how many of you have actually seen my previous session on JavaScript. Radhika, Sadhika, Sheetal, can you have Radhika seen the session on JavaScript? Sorry, Radhika, did you speak something I didn't hear? Yeah, we can't hear you, Radhika. I think Sheetal, can you hear Radhika?
No, Samantha. I cannot hear
Okay.
that.
She said yes.
Okay, she said yes. So Swapna, have you seen the JavaScript session?
One session.
One session, okay. Okay, I think there's a lot of variability, so it's much better if we can just go through the concepts again and write the code again. Okay, let's create one more folder then. Why not create one here? Okay. Right. So if you remember, the first thing that we want to do is like include the JavaScript in our HTML code, right? And just the way we were doing it for CSS, like you had the link thing there, and there were like three different ways to include CSS in our HTML. One was the inline style, one was the internal style, and the other one was the external style. So for JavaScript, I mean, it's not like internal style, external style, or stuff like that. But yeah, you can do it like in two ways. One is to use this script tag here. So inside the script tag, you can write your JavaScript code. Or the other one is to use link and the rel equals to uh, type equals to text slash JavaScript, and then you can provide the href as like sample.js or something like that. Okay, and then we close it. So this way it gets included. Okay, we will, okay, yeah, we actually, when you are importing your, what I can say, into Bootstrap, when you import your CDN, you actually have imported your JavaScript like that. Let me just show you. Yeah. Mm, yeah. So this one. So you don't have to like put cross origin and stuff. I'll explain to you what is cross origin. Okay, but you can use the, sorry, you can use a script tag and you can include your JavaScript code here in this way. Like script source equals to this, and if you're using like link or something, then you have to specify like what is the kind of code that you're referring to. For example, if you're using link equals to something, then you have to specify like type equals to text slash JavaScript, or if you're using like simple script tags, then in that case you can directly you put the source there. And if you're using link, then you should use href there. Yeah, but we will not use the external, script files today. We will just use the script tag because it's our first thing. We just need to correlate our HTML and CSS, HTML and JavaScript together to like see both the things in one frame. So yeah, we want to do an external file today, but you can always we will do, or we are going to do it a lot when we start with HTML. We start with React, but and you can always Google and find out like how to include an external file. But for today, we'll just go with the script tag just to keep things simple. Okay, so as I said that, the JavaScript is the, when we talk about the UX and UI, UX is the like the non-functional aspect of your code, just the design and how things look, the cosmetic things. And the JavaScript is what makes the gizmos work. Like if you have like if you have something, let's say you have a form and you have a button, when you click OK on the button or submit on that button, immediately the data gets submitted. It gets posted through to the server. Okay, if you click on like get profile details, as soon as you click on it, all the profile details gets fetched. So the underlying code that's getting executed, okay, to do all those things is JavaScript. And it doesn't matter what kind of framework that you use, whether you use Angular or you use React. At the end of the day, what's running at the end is like JavaScript code. Okay, just like in CSS, whether you use Bootstrap or you Materialize or anything like that, the only thing that works in the underground is like the normal CSS. And the same thing is for JavaScript. So anything like React or Angular, they're just frameworks. You can always create single page applications even without using React, but obviously you'll have to do a lot of more hard work for that. And React makes your life easier by providing you the tools through which you can create custom components and reuse them in your applications. Okay. So what we do here today is like we create a very simple form first. Okay. So let's say the first name is, we just provide tag here. The last name, we give the email, and we give the phone number. Okay, and at the end of everything, we give the button. and let me change submit. Um, let's give it a right. Please register. Proceed. Okay, so we have a very simple thing here. Let's just run it once and see the HTML gets rendered. We're going to run HTML here. Yeah. So right now it looks something like this. Welcome to our website. Please register. Here you can put your name and there's something last name, some email, some phone number you want, and then you click on submit. But if you click on submit, nothing happens, right? And if you write something here, still doesn't happen, nothing happens. But we'll make certain things happen right now. Yeah, and I'll tell you how to do that. Let's first identify each of our elements here, right? So this is our first name. Maybe we can first let's put some placeholder here so that we can identify what we're talking about in your first name. So you know what a placeholder is, right? If you don't know, you'll know right now. Your last name. Mm, remember. This is what a placeholder is like. It appears like a muted text in your input tag, and then when you write your original thing, it just disappears. Okay. And that's one attribute that we're giving to the input tag. Let's give it some another attribute. This is like ID equals to first name, right? And give it some ID here just to uniquely identify them. Last name. Hmm, hmm, right. So that's all that we have. Now let's write some JavaScript code. Yeah. Uh, Maybe first thing that we might want to write here in the script tag is like just to see if our JavaScript at least is working. So we write something like alert, hello, JavaScript. Sorry. Okay. Let's save this and see what happens here. Yeah. So the page says hello JavaScript is working, which means that our script tag is able to load JavaScript. So let's remove this and let's start writing some JavaScript. So the first thing, so what we want to do is like we want to validate different functions here. I mean the different fields here. For example, function validate first. Yeah, it's the first one. Oh, okay. I started with JavaScript. So I just have a question like what's your depth with JavaScript, everyone? Like do you know some basic things about JavaScript like writing while loop, for loop, variables and everything?
I know it's
Um,
something.
yeah, so you know it. Okay. What about Sadika? Sadika knows because she was there in the first session. Sheetal and Sapna.
Yeah, I have idea.
Yeah, okay. Then we are good to go with at least the validation, right? Okay, I'll keep with validation. And if you guys have any questions, then about like basic JavaScript syntax, you can always refer to my first session. You may remember, like guys, if you are familiar with like some academic languages like C, C++, and all those things. I'm not saying academic languages, but more like low-level languages like C, then you will see a lot of weird things happening in JavaScript. For example, you can create a function in JavaScript without naming it. That's called an anonymous function. In Java also you have it nowadays with Java 8. You have the Lambda expressions, which does the same work. Then you have arrow functions in JavaScript. Okay, so we don't really use the function keyword. We can use the arrow functions also. And one more weird thing about it is like you can also assign a function to a variable. Okay, so yeah, I mean these days you also do it in Java also. Like you in Java you have the Lambda expressions. You can actually use the consumer interface in Java to assign a Lambda expression and then you reuse it in somewhere in your code. Okay, but in JavaScript, you don't have to do all those things, consumer and stuff and everything, like you do in Java. The reason is like Java is a strict OOP language, which is stands for strict object-oriented programming, but JavaScript is not strict OOP. Okay, and you have the disadvantages for that also. Like it's not all green. I mean, for having to code in a not strict OOP language comes with some disadvantages and some advantages also, and that's where the TypeScript comes in. Okay, so I've said that I'll talk about TypeScript at the end of the course, where I'll just give you some pointers on like what TypeScript does and how to use it in your React code. But we should start with JavaScript based React because then you get an idea. And TypeScript is just a superset of JavaScript. So all the functionalities that you have in JavaScript, you also have with TypeScript. Just that TypeScript has one additional thing, which is the types itself. Like you have a type defined, you have to define for each and every variable, and that's how it makes it, strict too. Okay. So, anyways, let's come back to our discussion here. So, what I was trying to say is like if you are not familiar with some things, then you can always refer to my first session where I talked about various things like arrow functions and ECMAScript and everything. What the time being will just stick with what we're doing here. So anyway, let's say the validate first name. So what we want to do here is like we should check that the first name should not be more than maybe let's say 9 characters. Then we validate last name. Again, should not be more than let's say 5 characters. 6 characters. Then we have function validate. Okay, then what do you have as a phone number? Phone number should only contain numbers. Function validate design, the other field. We have the email. Okay. Validate email. So remember, guys, in validating email, we use regex expressions. I'll talk about regex later on. I mean, it's more like an advanced topic. Right now, we're just the beginning with JavaScript, so I'll not cover regex. But if you have used like languages like Python, then you might already be familiar with regex. It works more like an automaton in your theory of computation. If you might have read automata and DFA and NFA, all those things. So it works more like DFA in in kind of pattern matching for strings. So yeah, you can Google about regex, but we will not discuss it in our like first class of JavaScript. It's more like a little bit of an advanced topic. But what I want you to do, I want you to know is like remember that in validating email, we use regular expressions instead of like writing normal CSS, normal JavaScript code. But for the timing, we'll just keep it simple. So for validate email, just say that it should at least contain iterate symbol, a very simple validation. Now what I want to do is like if all these validations comes out to be work true, then what I want is for it to show submitted. Successfully. Okay. And one thing that's very clear from this is like uh, each of them should return a boolean type like true or false, whether the validation for first name was true or it was false or stuff like that. So if we talk about the validation of the first name, okay. So what we do is like first let's integrate our submit function here and let's check if it's getting called. So when you have this button, so yeah, one thing, so in JavaScript you have got event listeners. So event listeners are like you can pass you can use it as an attribute and you can pass special JavaScript functions to it just to like the event listener is essentially going to record if the event that you're looking for has happened, and then it just fires the function that you're trying to do. So you can like Google this event listeners in JavaScript, and there are like lots of different kinds of event listeners. Um, I think one is mouse on over, then you have mouse keyboard down and all those things. So mouse on over means like if you assign it, if you use this event listener with an HTML element, then it just gives true if your mouse pointer is over that HTML element. Okay, so generally we use on mouse over to, make a different style to your button. So for example, if your button looks blue, but as soon as you if you go over it, then you can then it becomes red. You can always use the hover actually, the hover pseudo selector for using CSS to do that, but you can also do it using JavaScript. Okay, so you can Google about the event listeners in JavaScript. There are lots of them. Okay, and you can use any one of them. But let's first see if this gets fired. So in the button, I'll use the event listener on click, and I'll pass this function submit. And let's see if this works. If it works, then it will show submitted successfully. We refresh this, we click on submit. I say submitted successfully. So yeah, our event listener was able to successfully fire the submit function once it receives the on click event. We clicked on the button, so that registered an on click event. And when that gets happened, it fires the submit function. And that's how we got submitted successfully. Now all we have to do is like for each function, we have to write a corresponding code for that. So the first is like validate first name. The first name should not be more than 9 characters. So like the first thing that you want to do is like to get what the user has entered in the first name field. Like you have the first name. If I enter something, the first thing is like we want to get that value. So we have already uniquely identified this input element with this first name using the ID. So you can use document dot get element by ID, and you can pass the ID to it, first name, Now this document.getElementById, it will return you an object, right? And in that object, you will have a key called value. So you just want to access that. If you want to see what object gets returned, just console log this part, and you'll be able to see. And yeah, so the value gets returned. What I want to do is like assign it to a variable. So maybe first name. Yeah, so that gets done. Now the second thing is like first name should not be more than 9 characters. So if you can write it like this, if first name and dot, I think, what was the function there? Write it here in the console. Equals to say dot area, a dot length. So a dot length is should not be more than 9 characters. So it should be less than 9 characters, or it can be equal to 9 characters. If that's the case, then return true. Else return false. You don't have to write the statement here. Return false. So that is like one way to do. But if you are like working in a company and if you write code like this, most likely you are going to get rejected. So, I mean, your code review, when you create a pull request and you ask for reviews, then they will probably point out that this is not the correct way to write. I mean, it's okay for you to like, it's very simple kind of a code, but the best way to write it is to use a ternary operator instead of like this. So what you need to do is like write it like this: return first name dot length less than equals to 9. Put a question mark, return true. Sorry, it should be just true, and then follow is false. So something like this should write your, instead of using the if else conditions and stuff like that, you should use a ternary operator. Maybe for readability, you can also enclose it within the brackets. Even if you don't enclose it, it's fine, but it might be more readable. Now let's come back here. Let's refresh this. And right now, let's just check if we are able to, like, what's getting returned from here. So let's alert this maybe, or maybe I'll console log this. Validate. Right. First name. Calls. Yeah. So mining. So that will be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, it's more than 9, so it's fine. Go to the console here, and then click on submit. So it says submitted successfully. Okay, it's come to the console, it says true. So it means that our function, this validate first name, returned true because my length was, hey, wait, why should it return true? It should return what's the length here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, it's just 9. That's why, yeah, then it's fine. If it would have been 10, it should return false. Yeah, so it's fine. Now let's okay, so let's take it in a variable then. First name, validation, first name. Similarly, let's write it for the last name also. This will be last name. Should not be more than 6 characters. So the code looks very similar. Oops. The code looks very similar. So this should be last name, and you should be mm, last name and last name, and the condition will be different. So this should be 6. And we take it in another variable, last relation. All right. So we give our first name, we give our last name. So our last name is like 5 characters long. So it should also return true. But we have not console logged it. Probably submit. So it's true. So it's working fine. Now let's come to the validate phone, or maybe first we need to validate email. So in here, let email document not get element by ID, and we pass the ID that we have assigned to it to uniquely identify and paste value. So what we want to do in validate email is just we need to see if it contains the includes, it includes the @. So there's a handle function in JavaScript through which you can do it. All you have to do is like return email includes, pass the character. If it includes it, then it should return true. Otherwise, it should return false. Should end here. Right. And let's say some more. Let's see the tools submitted and shipped. Okay, there's something wrong here. Type email validation is not a function. Maybe we have done some typo. Email is not a function and it's valid email actually. Refresh this. Okay. Now works. And the depth use is true, right? So it works. If we remove this @ from here and then we submit, then we will get it as false here. Yeah. So it works. And now the final thing is to validate the phone number. Okay. So first is the boilerplate stuff that we have been doing, like valid number, valid phone number, and now here phone number phone number equals what was it? Okay, so another question is like if you are given a string, then how in JavaScript, using JavaScript, you can find out whether it's a number or not. Okay, so I mean, there are like 2, 3 different ways in which you can do it. I have discussed it in my first session, but today I'm going to use the one that's most commonly used, which is this NaN function, NaN. Okay, so all you have to do is like, let's say a equals to 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and we just have to pass a dot is NaN. Okay, that's not a function. What was it? Is NaN.
Amendra, you assigned a string value to a number.
Yeah, that's right. That's fine. That's the purpose of it, right? Yeah, it's is NaN. The function is NaN. So, so this is a string thing. So it kind of return false here. But let's say like if you have a as 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. Then if you write it as like sorry 1, 2, 3, 4, it still return false. But if you write a equals to let's say a b c d, and then you write is NaN to a, then it returns true. So what NaN means, like it's called not a number. So what is NaN is checking is like whether what is checking is like, is it a number or not? If it's not a number, then it will return true. And if it's a number, then it will return false. So for example, if you have a, even though it's enclosed in like double quotes, it's a string. Okay, but if you pass this to is NaN function, it will return false, which means that it's a number, even though it's a string. Like even though it's enclosed, but within the enclosure is the string is just a number. That's why it's returned false. Similarly, if you just assign 1, 2, 3, 4, and if you pass it to it, it is going to still return false because this is still a number. But if you use like a b c d and if you pass it to it, then it returns true. So for example, if you have like a let's say 1, 2, 3, a4, something like that. So this is not a valid number. So if you pass it to NaN, then it returns true because it's not a valid number. But if you write it like 1, 2, 3, and you want to check, even though it's a string, you want to check whether the string contains a number or not, then you can pass it and it will return false. So false means it's a number and true means it's not a number. Okay. So remember this because we will flip our, ternary operation return parts. So that's a phone number that we have. We just need to return this. Return is name and pass the phone number to it. We create a question mark. So if it's really a number, then it is going to return false. So if it returns false, then we should return true. And if it returns true, then we should return false. Right? So like if the phone number is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then is NaN is going to return false. And then it will go to here, and that means that this is actually a number, and that's why it's returning true. So yeah, the ternary operation gets flipped because the is NaN function actually checks whether something is not a number. Okay, that's fine. So yeah, that's all from the validate phone number section. We'll just check once if our function is working correctly or not. Okay. Phone number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Okay. Yeah. You can submit. Yeah, so it returns true, which means that it's a valid number. While if you give like 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, 5, or maybe 5, and click on submit, then it returns false because it's not a valid number. So our function is all working fine. All now we have to do is like integrate all of them, and that's it. So what we should do is like, yeah. So first, so uh, if first name validation is true and last name validation is true and email validation is true and validate number, so validation and validate number, all these are true, then we return alert success submitted. Otherwise, alert, sorry, speaking, no. Okay, so let's see if our integration works now. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. First, let's test with the happy path. And yeah, it says I've submitted successfully, but if we change something here, we put it as an A, remove the @ from here, maybe at least this will do. So it says, okay, still says submitted successfully, so it looks like something went wrong. Yeah. So can that be wrong here? So everything is like it basically means that all of them return true. That's why it says successfully submitted the form. They say that. No, it says, oh, okay, submitted success. I think we have not refreshed our page then. Yeah. Yeah. Now we check again. Submitted. Okay, now it says, I'm sorry, something went wrong. Yeah, what is wrong here? I think, yeah, everything is fine. So it seems like one of the variables have returned false. That's why we entered the alert statement. So let's check which one has returned false. First, let me check if this is all correctly used. Yeah, all of them are used correctly. So all we have to do is like
Uh,
console log. Yeah.
That is validate number, that is validate phone number, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this is the function name.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's console log all of them and we will get to know who the culprit is here. Let's refresh this and try it once more. We click on submit. Okay, now this is submitted the form successfully. If we remove @, you can submit it, say something went wrong, that's fine. We assign GH 115. Yes, submit something went wrong, correct. We make everything correct and submit it. Okay. Yeah. So I think at that point of time, maybe due to browser caching, it might not have updated the current value. right? Because it's working fine now. I think we did not properly refresh it or something happened at that point of time. So anyway, it's working fine. So we can test it with some more data. Like for example, we put the last name to be greater than more than 6 letters. If we like this then it should not submit. Yeah. Similarly, if we make the first name to be really guys really a longer, should if it's more than 9 characters, then it should not submit. Remove it. Okay, if the email does not contain a disable, then it should not submit. And if it contains like some letters, then it should not submit. We add it here. Yeah. If we remove everything, then everything looks fine, then we can submit and say submitted form successfully. Yeah. So yeah, so our integration works. And yeah, one more thing here, we should not write it like this if a statement. Maybe if you have like a situation like, you have like many and things, then you can assign it to a variable like final result, and you assign this entire thing there. Something like this. And now we can return final result. So when you paste alert, or init, is anything done here? Is it like something wrong here? Submit is not defined. Unexpected token. Okay. Yeah, this should be a question mark. And on the time. Yeah. Yeah. So you should write it in this way. This is like a more readable form. Yeah. And assigning the final statement, final result here. And then you can, simply, return it based on a ternary operation that we are doing here. So what we have seen today is like a very basic example of form validation. So, and the main purpose generally for these kind of assignments is like for you to actually see how we can hook the HTML elements with its corresponding JavaScript elements and execute the functions. So, I mean, it's just the tip of the iceberg. There is a lot of things in JavaScript that we still need to learn. Okay, tomorrow we will cover a little bit of more advanced topics. So, like last time when I took the session, I discussed about the structuring of objects. I discussed about some stream methods like map, reduce, filter, etc. So I would ask you to refer to to that session, for those are like a little bit advanced topics that I did with Sadhika. And so I want you guys to refer to that session and come back to me if you have any questions. In there, I've like shown you with examples how you can use the stream methods to essentially process your data. So yeah, you can have a look at it and then come back to me if you have any questions. So tomorrow, I think tomorrow, so what I'll do is like from tomorrow, I'll start with React. Okay. Generally, I don't want to waste a lot of time on JavaScript. If you know form validation and basic stuffs of JavaScript, that's it. The reason is that in React also we do JavaScript only. So if you whatever learning is left for you in JavaScript, you can always do it in React because there also we will write a lot of JavaScript code. So from the next session, we'll start with some basic React. Okay, and we will cover a little bit of some advanced topics in JavaScript like closures and all those things. Yeah, closures and stuff are something that we use in React in sagas. We'll talk about sagas later on. But yeah, we use them in sagas. And if there and some of the nitty-gritty topics that are there in JavaScript, we will cover it in while we are doing React at that point of time. We'll cover it. Yeah, one more thing. The difference. So in here, if you see the code, you will see that I have used let. So you in JavaScript, you can define it like const, or you can define it like let, or you can do it like var. So you can refer to the session in the last time I think, and you will get to know, understand the difference between const. Const is like constant, you can't change. If you define a variable as constant, assign a value to it, then you won't be able to like change the value of that variable. Or like in React form, in React terminology, we say mutate the variable if you have defined it with constant. And the difference between let and var is something that you can get it in the first session that we took. So yeah, so you can also refer it there, and if you have any questions, you can come back to me. So yeah, so I like request you guys to actually see the session instead. Okay, to see the session, yeah, to see the session, to see the first session and see the JavaScript topics that I've covered there, and then we can start with React from tomorrow. And yeah, and your the CSS, the bootstrap part that we have done. So like you can try it out. So if in terms of practicals, do the bootstrap part. And the JavaScript part that I've taught in the first session is more like, just elementary. So you can just open dev tools like this, and you can try it out from here. Nothing like not a formal assessment, just for you to try out all the JavaScript code. And for the CSS one, yeah, you can use your block and style it in that way. So that's all then. And if you guys have any questions, you can ask now. We can meet tomorrow and get started with React. Check what she's saying. Okay. Guys, if you have any question, you can ask now.
Quick question, Soumendra.
Mm-hmm.
In JavaScript, we have that asynchronous calls or some Ajax, what all those things, we don't need it. Directly in React, we can learn things.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can, so asynchronous calls and other things, yeah, we will, we'll learn React at that point of time, I'll talk about promises and how to write async, how to use async await in the functions. So that's what I was like saying, like in JavaScript, whatever we are going to do, we are also going to do in React. So it's better to keep learning React, and there only we can learn about that. Yeah, that's fine. I
Okay,
mean,
so
yeah, to answer your question, like, yes, it will be used quite frequently, but it's something that we will learn while we are doing React.
okay, got it.
Okay. Any guys, any other questions? Sadhika, Sheeta, Sapna, I think Radhika dropped off.
Somendra, why Radhika dropped off?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe we can ask her, maybe Sadhika or Sheetal knows.
Okay.
I don't.
She didn't say anything. She middle drop.
Okay.
Okay.
So, anyways, so Sadhika, Sheetal, and Swapna, I think, Swapna, do you have any questions?
And no questions, but is it possible to send that code in the chat, or we need to do
Yeah,
everything?
yeah, I was wondering, like, Alok, is there a way we can send this code?
Which code you want to share, Somendra?
This one that we,
This-
so there are like three files. One is the, we did created three, like wrote three
So
codes here.
can you upload it on? Let me give you the Git access, and I will give the same access to our all trainees, so they can
Yeah,
directly get the code from Git. I'll
yeah,
create
correct.
one common repository. Okay.
Yeah, that works. Yeah.
Sure.
But
Sure. I'll do that.
do they know how to use Git? I think last time I asked Sadhika, Sheetal, Sapna, do you know how to use Git?
I think Sheetal already aware of that.
I know it. Yeah. I know
Yeah,
it.
okay. Okay, Sheetal,
Not
so
said before.
yeah, I know. So last time I asked, I mean, some of the members did not know how to use Git. So will Sheetal be able to give a small transition on not the entire Git, but maybe some basics so that they can download the files and see? Okay, or maybe like
I
so
know.
say, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I know.
We will,
I know.
yeah. So we will help. We will help them. Somendra, not an issue. Git
Okay.
is not an issue.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, then yeah, that solution works. So Alok will give me the Git access, I mean the GitHub repository link, and I'll push the files there, and then you can, pull it from your local, and you'll get all the files there. Okay, guys,
Okay.
any other questions? Are we good to close now? Then okay,
Yes.
I take this. Yeah, okay. So, okay, then let's meet tomorrow and we'll start with the basics of React, and along with that, we'll keep scoring in JavaScript. And meanwhile, you can try your hands out on Bootstrap, and we will actually also use not Bootstrap, but perhaps Materialize in our React application. So yeah, it would be better if you can get some idea from there, and then we'll use it in React app in the same way that we are using it in HTML. Okay, then let's meet tomorrow. Have a good day, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, Somendra.
Thanks.